Hi everybody, and welcome to my Stamperia Songs of the Sea mini album tutorial series designed for Scrap and Create. The products that I am using today from the Stamperia Songs of the Sea collection are listed in the description box below, so you can click on those links to go to the Scrap and Create website to purchase those products and follow along. And there are also links to some products available in my Etsy shop, so if you would like to purchase those, you can click on those links too. Stay tuned for the tutorial. In today's tutorial, we're going to focus on building page 1. So I have my page base here. I'm going to set aside for now, and I'm going to bring in all of my pieces, tell you the measurements, and how to score them. First, we're going to cut a piece to 4 3/4 by 4 1/2. On the 4 1/2 inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch. Then we're going to cut a piece 7 inches by 2 1/2 inches. On the 2 1/2 inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch. Then we're going to cut a piece to 7 inches by 5 1/4 inches. On the 5 1/4 inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch. Next, I'm going to take my pieces with my scissors, and I am going to cut those corners from the score line inward to miter each of my tabs on all of my pieces. Then once those tabs are removed, I'm going to fold back on all of these score lines and burnish on both directions for all 3 pieces. Once all of my pieces are scored, I'm going to start with my 7 inch larger flap, and I'm going to adhere this to the top of my page in the center. Now remember, my pages are going to be top loading pages, so I am going to make sure that everything is lined up nice and neat with this top edge. And then the bottom edge too, if you did a cut and it's not quite right, if it's hanging down at all, you want to trim this piece so that everything is nice and straight. Once my larger flap is on, I'm going to take my smaller 7 inch wide flap, apply my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab section on the back. This is eventually going to be a pocket, but we won't do that until we put our decorative paper on. I'm turning this around because it's easier for me. We're going to place this on the bottom of the flap we just placed down on the page. That way the top is open, and again, we'll glue the sides down later and we'll create a pocket from this flap. So what I like to do when I'm building my pages is put some notes here. So a P stands for pocket, so that later when I come back, if I forget what this was supposed to be, I will know to glue these sides down for my pocket. Then I have my final piece, and I'm going to be placing this here as another flap. Now I want this to be in the center, so I'm going to bring in my centering ruler here and mark this where it needs to go. So it's going to be 2 3/8 of an inch from the center. And then I will apply my adhesive on my 1/2 inch tab. And then I'm going to line the top of this flap up with the top of the previous flap, centering that there on the page, and then burnishing this down. So now we have our flap that flips up. We'll have our pocket here. Then this whole flap will flip up, room for the spread inside here. Next, we're going to move on to the back side of page 1. For the back of page 1, we're going to cut 2 pieces to 7.5 by 4.25. On the first piece, on the 7.5 inch side, we're going to score this at 1/2 inch on the right hand side. On the second piece, we're going to score on the 7.5 inch side at 1/2 inch on the left hand side. Then we're going to cut 2 pieces of cardstock to 2.25 by 4.25. On the first piece, we're going to score on the 2.25 inch side at 1/2 inch on the right hand side. On the second piece, on the 2.25 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch on the left hand side. And then we're going to cut 2 pieces that measure 5 3/4 by 4 inches, but these don't need scored. For all 4 pieces, we're going to miter those corners on those 1/2 inch tabs from the score line, cutting inward. Once those corners are mitered, we're going to fold on those score lines and use our bone folder to burnish all 4 pieces. Now I have the base of my page. This is the front. Remember, this is going in the album in the hinge at the bottom. So I need to make sure to flip this paper over. I have mine so that they are marked page 1 front, page 1 back. It's upside down because I just flip my pages over. So I need to remember that that is upside down and it is the incorrect direction. I'm going to take one of my long flaps, and I've got the one with the tab on the right hand side. I'm going to apply my adhesive to that tab, and I'm going to adhere this to the right hand side of the page in the center, lining up that score line with the edge of my page, and then I'll use my bone folder to burnish this down. Now I'm going to open this flap up, take my second large flap and apply my adhesive to that 1/2 inch tab section. This one is the left side one, so I'm going to adhere this here in the center. I'm first going to place it on the page, then I'm going to close this flap and line up the top and bottom edges of these 2 flaps so that they are straight across top and bottom, and then I'll make sure that it's straight down the side of the page and then burnish. So now when my flaps are closed, they are straight at the top and bottom. I'm going to open both of these flaps up. Then I'm going to take my 2 smaller pieces. I have the one with the tab on the left-hand side first. I'm going to apply my adhesive here, and then I'm going to adhere this to the end of the tab on the left, and then burnish this down. Now this is going to become a pocket once that decorative paper is on. And this will be a photo mat that will slide into this pocket here. I'm going to do the same thing with the small flap on this side. So I'm going to first add my adhesive to my 1/2 inch tab, and then apply my piece to the right hand side, and then burnish this down. And then my second piece will be a photo mat for this side. So then I'm going to close that flap and close that flap. And for now, that is page 1. We're going to move on and build page 2. The first piece we will need for the front of page 2, we're going to cut 2 1/4 by 5 3/4. On the 5 3/4 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch and 5 1/4 inches. Then we'll cut one piece to 11 inches by 4 1/4 inches. On the 11-inch side, we're going to score this at 7 1/2 inches. And 3 inches. Then we're going to turn onto the 4 1/4 inch side and score at 1/2 and 3 3/4. Then you'll need to cut one piece to 6 1/4 by 4 1/4, but we will not need to score this one. For the 2 1/4 inch piece, we're going to use our scissors to miter those corners from the score line inward. And then we're going to fold on those score lines. Then for this piece, on the right hand side, this is the side that has the 3-inch section. We're going to cut down on that score line, and then we're going to cut from that score line inward. We'll do the same thing on this side. And then here, actually, we can cut all the way down to the second set. Then this one will miter. So both sides, we need to cut those 1/2 inch tabs off. And then on the bottom section, this 3 1/2 inch section, we will cut from the score line inward. And then we're going to fold on these score lines. Then we're going to fold up here. And then we'll fold down here. So then we'll have a piece like this. This will be a pocket eventually. We can put some photo mats in there, and then this will be the closure. So it's like an envelope. I'm going to start with this piece. It's a belly band I'm going to place in the center of the page. So I have already marked the center of my page 1 1/8 of an inch on each side of center. So I'm going to place my band here, making sure that the top and bottom edges are lined up so that they are straight, and then I will burnish down. Now this I'm going to set right here on top of my belly band like this, and I want this to be in the center of my page, and I'm using the grid on my mat to know where to line this up, but you can also measure this if you want to. And then I am going to mark here and here, and then I'm just going to draw a line here so I know where to place this back down. Now where my line is on my belly band, I'm just going to add my adhesive. And then I'll place this down. I'm going to have mine open up to, the right-hand side. Then I'm just going to place this right back between those lines that I drew. and burnish this down. Then I'm going to take my adhesive and I'm going to apply it to these little 1/2-inch tabs here inside to close this up to form that pocket. Then I'm going to take my 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 inch piece and place it back here on my belly band. And this is it for the front of page 2. So I'm going to flip over and we'll start on the back of page 2. The first piece we need for the back of page 2 is 7 1/4 by 5 1/4. On the 5 1/4 inch side, we're going to score at the bottom at 1/2 inch. Next, we need a piece that measures 2 1/2 by 4 3/4. On the 2 1/2 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch on the right-hand side. Then we need a piece that measures 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. On one of the sides, we're going to score at 1/2 inch. And then the final piece, 5 3/4 by 4 3/4. On the 5 3/4 inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch on the right-hand side. Next, I'm going to take my scissors and miter these end pieces, so from the score line into the center. I'm going to do that for all 4 of my pieces, and then I'm going to fold on these score lines and burnish my folds. Just like with page 1, I want to make sure that I have page 2 in the correct orientation before I place any pieces on. Now I'm going to start with my largest flap, and I'm going to place this here on my page. So I'm going to apply my adhesive to this 1/2 inch tab, and then I'm going to line up the score line with the bottom edge of my paper or my page, and then the rest should also be lined up. Then I'm going to burnish this down with my bone folder. And then what I'm going to do next is take my 4 3/4 by 5 3/4 inch piece, and I'm going to place it here. I want to make sure that this will fit on my page once it is folded up. So you can see that it's hanging over just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is bring my paper trimmer in here, and I am going to, from the bottom, trim just a little tiny bit. That might not be enough. I might need to do just a little bit more. But I just need to get a little sliver, that'll do it, off of my paper so that this will fit in here. And when it folds, it won't be hanging out of the top. So now that my piece is good, I'm going to take my adhesive and apply it to that 1/2 inch tab and adhere this down to the right side of my page, making sure that that right edge and the bottom edge are lined up. Then I'll burnish this down. Next, I'm going to take my 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 inch piece, and I'm going to set it on here. Now, because I trimmed a little bit off of that previous piece, I'm going to need to trim a little bit off of this piece as well. So I'm going to add this one to my paper trimmer and just trim a little tiny piece off. Then I'm going to set this on here and fold over in this direction. And you can see that, again, it's just a little bit larger because of that score line. So I am going to trim now just a little tiny bit off of my right edge. And you'll see there's just little tiny pieces that I'm taking off. So then my paper should fit here. And once this is folded, it's the same exact size. So now I'm gonna take my adhesive and apply it here to my 1/2 inch tab. And then lining up the top edge and the right edge. Then the bottom edge should also be lined up. Go ahead and burnish that, fold that to make sure it's still in line. Everything looks good. So now when I have this flipped up, we'll have that whole spread. I'm going to close this and close that. Then the last thing I'm going to do is take this piece, apply my adhesive to that 1/2 inch tab section, and then I'm going to adhere this to the right side of my page so that that score line is lined up with the edge, and then the top and bottom should be in line. Now this is going to become a pocket once I have my decorative paper on. So I'm going to make myself a note here. And then I haven't decided if I'm just going to put a regular photo mat or if I'm going to put some of the cut apart. So we'll come back and we'll put something in this pocket later. So that is it for the back side of page 2. So we have page 1 and page 2 complete for our album. That's all for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we will build pages 3 and 4, so stay tuned. See you in the next tutorial.